have been amazing spokesmen for the importance of PSA testing and early detection. So join me in welcoming in Bret Wilson and George Brookman. As many of you know, Bret is the Dragon Emeritus of the 3 seasons on Dragon's Den. He's built an extensive holdings in power generation, real estate development, cannabis, agriculture, sports and entertainment industries. And I've actually been handed a piece of paper here that says a little known fact that our very own co-host Bill Brooks wanted to be just like Bret Wilson. And the doctor said, okay, well, you've got prostate cancer. So that is an actual thing. Now, George Brookman is also well-known in Calgary's business and volunteer community. His business, West Canadian Industries Group, is Canada's leading digital print and document management organization. George serves on the board for the Field of Crosses, Calgary Flames Foundation, and the Castle Avery Hospitality Ventures. So this afternoon, we're talking about how we can overcome adversity and hardship, which is something that you're both familiar with. Bret, can you share your experience with prostate cancer and what that fight taught you?
Oh, hey, Fuzzy, we got Bret's not quite on yet. We're joined by George right now.
Okay, so about that, George. We're going to start with you. So, George, after your diagnosis, did you approach your health challenge the same way that you approached business, or did you take a bit of a different approach?
Well, that's a great question. And let me just make sure, first of all, that you can hear me all right, and that you just wave your hand and let me know that it's coming through loud and clear. Perfect.
Loud and clear. I got you, George.
Perfect. Well, it's a bit of a shake-up when your doctor phones you and says, guess what? You've got to go and have an examination at the prostate center. And but I was pretty fatalistic about it, to be honest. I hate to sound cavalier, but at the end of the day, it didn't really disrupt my world very much at all. And you have a kind of a moment when you think you're going to change the way you live your life, and you're going to do all sorts of things differently. And then a few months later, you find yourself doing just the same things again. And I've been very fortunate. I'm very healthy today, and virtually unscathed by the experience.
Do you find that you have a different view on life after going through this battle? Has there been a sort of a shift in your priorities?
I wish I could say that it has, but truth is, I was always, I care a great deal about my family, so that hasn't changed. I remember when they wheeled me in, and they give you a shot, and then you lay there for about 40 minutes before they take you into the operating room. And I remember that moment thinking, what if this doesn't work out? And you always have those thoughts. And thinking, well, I'm not unhappy with my life. I built a nice business. I have a good family. I was with the Stampede. I have made it a mark. So I felt good about it. And when I came out, I still felt good. So I think, I've been very fortunate. I feel very energetic. It's 10, 12 years now since I had my surgery, and my life has carried on very well and straightforward.
And that's what we like to hear. And that's one of the reasons why the Prostate Cancer Center here in Calgary does so many great things. And it helps people like you and men all over the city. I'm being told that we have Bret on the line right now. Bret, are you there?
I'm as here as I can be.
Excellent, Bret. Bret, can you share your experience with prostate cancer and what that fight taught you?
Oh God, have we got an hour?
For you, we'll make the time.
So I'm a 3-timer now, and the week I turned 44, I was first diagnosed with, at that time, a pretty serious case of prostate cancer, and I chose a radiation protocol that called brachytherapy that was considered by many to be experimental, but I was one of the first Canadians to go down that path, and it was out of that I discovered the gap between where we were in Canada and some of the other parts of the world. Of course, there's technology is always racing forward in different places, and that was a big part of the stimulus behind the work I did with Doc Siemens in terms of advancing, the urology center for Southern Alberta at the Rocky View Hospital. Anyway, round 1, brachytherapy. Had some serious side effects from called radiation cystitis, which is internal bleeding and burning of the urethra, and we're not going to get into a lot more detail than except to say that was by far the most challenging part of my treatment protocol. Then round 2 was 14 years later, 5 years ago, And I ended up with discovering that my lymph nodes, 4 or 5 of them, were fairly active in terms of recurrent prostate cancer. And the good news is I'd made it past 10 years, which clinically they say once you're past 10, you're clear. Well, I got to 14 and discovered I wasn't clear. And then we got through that, radiation again. And then unfortunately, I had 1/3 run, and I haven't really talked much about it publicly, but I'm not ashamed of it in that sense. But I had another tumor discovered in my spine last summer, and had the incredible help. I hadn't fully appreciated how far the Tom Baker had advanced, but I worked very closely with an oncologist, a radiation specialist, and we radiated the tumor in my spine very successfully right in the middle of Stampede last year. So, and it didn't interrupt my stampeding at all. It was a pretty straightforward process. But what I'm most proud of is that I can go anywhere in the world for treatment. Calgary was the best place for me. So 3 runs, been there, done that, got the cup of coffee, and onward. And I'm pretty proud of what we've done in Southern Alberta in terms of looking after men's health, urology health, in particular prostate health.
Yeah, I'd like to pick up on what Bret just said as well. I had Dr. Kozak as my surgeon, and there's no way that I could say enough about him. He was serious. He was humorous. He was encouraging at all times. I remember after my surgery, I get a call from him, and he said, "I've got really good news." And I said, "What's that?" He said, "Well, we just got your final biopsy results, and you definitely had cancer." I said, "Why is that good news?" And he said, "Well, you wouldn't want to go through all that and then not have it, would you?"
And that's the benefit to early detection, right? Is getting that, so that way you can get those treatments, so that way they can fight it early, right?
Absolutely.
Well, I've said, sorry to interrupt, I've said several times that prostate cancer is a great disease to catch early and a terrible disease to catch late. And that's where awareness and knowledge is power. And I am incredibly frustrated by the medical community that says, don't bother getting your PSA tested until you're 40, 50, whatever the number is. Knowledge is power. And so if I'd had my PSA done when the year that I turned 40 instead of 43, I would have had knowledge and more options. The other thing is that the earlier you catch prostate cancer, and again, I'm an amateur, but I'm a fairly seasoned amateur, the more options you have, whether it's surgery or radiation, and there's different forms of radiation, but the earlier you catch it, the more knowledge you have. And they sometimes say that a falsely inflated or elevated PSA will unnecessarily disturb the recipient of the news. And I'm thinking, that's an issue for his doctor to deal with. If he can't handle giving the information correctly and couch it such that not everyone with an elevated PSA has cancer, but without knowing that your PSA is elevated, you're not going to look anyway, and then it's potentially too late.
And also a couple of days of worry as opposed to a couple of days of undiagnosed, or a couple of years of undiagnosed cancer. I'd rather have the worry than the undiagnosed cancer.
Perfect.
Right?
Well, there's no doubt about it. And I was always diligent about going and having a checkup every year. So I was never one of those folks that say, well, I hadn't been checked for 5 years. I hadn't been to the doctor for 5 years or whatever. And so I caught mine very, very early in the game and had great consultation. And as I say, Kozak did a fantastic job.
Now, Bret, earlier, George talked about basically whether or not he addressed how he approaches business and life after the diagnosis. Did you notice a big difference?
Yeah, I can actually get kind of emotional thinking about the first time cancer came into my life, the little C on your shoulder where you're just not sure what's next. And, I was 43, 44 years old. I'd had a career that had me working some incredibly long hours. And as cancer came into my life, I realized that I was very incomplete in terms of my relationships with some key friends, and in more particularly my family. And so I took advantage of, call it the cancer scare, to refocus and double down or triple up my efforts to be more complete, if you will, in terms of family relationships. Thus, when I was diagnosed with the second round of cancer 14 years later, I was pretty chill. I mean, I didn't want to die of cancer, but I was also very complete in the sense that if cancer got me this time, I was happy that I had built the relationships I cared about in terms of family and friends. And then I set about fighting it. And I certainly have another 20, 30 years of plans to continue to tweet and fight and do what I do in terms of enjoying the West.
If there's one message that you guys could pass on each, I'll get George, I'll get you to go first. If there's one message you could pass on to people watching right now, what would that be?
Get it regular checkups, stay very positive, and don't worry. Just take each day as it comes and give it your best.
And Bret, for you?
Well, I'm going to go big picture and say we should be supporting Aaron O'Toole, but I'm not sure what are the topics that we're allowed to cover here today.
Bret, we're not getting into politics.
Okay, I just want you asked for advice.
No, I don't make me regret it, Bret.
So, yeah, I mean, I think George went down the exact path, and it goes back to the earlier conversation about knowledge is power. Getting checked. I mean, when I first was diagnosed, there was a lot of talk about a PSA of 4 being, call it the gold standard. If you were below 4, you were probably fine. If you were above 4, you might have a problem. Well, I think the evolution of knowledge is that it's the change in PSA. It's how rapid is it growing. If it's steady at 4 for many years and then takes off, you might have a problem. But at the same time, I've had several friends with prostate cancer whose PSAs went from 1.5 to 3, all of that well below the standard of 4, but it's the change in the PSA. So it really comes down to plotting a chart, not a data point, but setting up a chart. And the earlier you start that, 35, 40, I'd certainly recommend that. And then, I mean, I'm at a point in my life where I'm getting PSA tested every 2 to 3 months because we monitor and watch very carefully. There's little doubt that on recurrent prostate cancer, the change in PSA is a fairly strong indicator that you have a problem somewhere. And there's lots of different treatment protocols and testing protocols and scan protocols. But most importantly, the PSA is how it all starts in terms of the first tidbit of knowledge. And as George says, get checked.
I think one of the interesting points that you made earlier, Bret, is that out of anywhere in the world that you could get treatment, and not only the treatment, but I think the support, because that's exactly what the Calgary Prostate Cancer Center gives, is that additional support in addition to the medical aspect of it. Calgary has something that a lot of other places don't.
Well, we've certainly got the Southern Institute, or the Southern Alberta Institute of Urology, and as much as my name's on the building, credit goes 100% to Doc Siemens and his family and the efforts that Doc put together. Doc tapped me on the shoulder one day and asked if I'd like to participate, and it was the right day, the right time, and I said yes, but it was Doc's initiative all the way. The other is that, just to tell a story a bit out of school, I went to Tom Baker last summer to get treated, and of course I was a little apprehensive about being recognized and wearing baseball cap and sunglasses and all that stuff. But literally, you go downstairs, and Tom Baker's an older building, but I remember coming through a sliding door into one of the new one of the radiation tools, and it was like a step. It was Captain Kirk and the Enterprise. It was unbelievable how modern and state-of-the-art that everything was inside the treatment room where I did my radiation on my spine. I was pretty proud. I didn't know about that. I trusted the people. And again, a lot of your treatment protocols are based on the people and how you trust, because there's a science, but there's also an art, and that art comes from experience. And so it's the application of science. And I came away very, very comfortable, and without naming doctors, because there's lots that are great, but the 2 or 3 that I was closely linked to were outstanding. I was really, really pleased. And but then walking into that room, as I said, the control center and the screens and the computers, and I had my 2 grandsons and my daughter and her husband were with me the first morning that I went for treatment, and everyone was just wide-eyed at the quality of what was living inside this sort of nondescript old building. It was outstanding. Something I'm very proud of.
Bret, you're making a great comment there, and I don't want to leave without making this comment. We hear so much about healthcare on the media these days, but in my years of experiences, and it's more decades than I want to count, I can never get over the quality of healthcare that we have in this province. certainly in Calgary and up there. And but whether it was for my family or myself or whatever, we are very blessed with good health care in this area.
Oh, absolutely. We've got great people. And as much as I give some of the doctors grief in terms of our overall medical budget, I believe that every doctor's entitled, every medical professional is entitled to reasonable compensation. And just for the record, I'm going back into the clinic for a fairly significant checkup and probably procedure next week. So I'm pretty happy that whole system is working as well as it is with the people that we have.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Now, we've talked about early detection. I think early treatment is also something that is great that we have here in this city. When I arrived here earlier today, they gave me a bit of a tour of the facilities and they walked me around, and they were talking about how the way that things are set up here at the Calgary Prostate Cancer Center, the treatments happen within days as opposed to within weeks or months. Can either of you talk about that?
Go first, Brett. You go first, Brett.
Well, my first experience with getting the biopsy, and frankly, the biopsy was a little more challenging than I expected, but we got that done on day one. And George is smiling because I can.
I'll tell you a story.
Yeah. You want to talk about your anyway? That snap, click, whoa. Yeah. Anyway, men who've been down this path know exactly what we're talking about. But again, it's something that has to be done. It's just part of the process, the protocol, the procedures. But in my case, my enormous frustration was in the people side, where it was something like 10 days between when my testing was done and when I actually got a phone call saying, "Hey, you've got cancer." And I know that we've accelerated that dramatically. I think the testing results might have sat on a desk for 4 or 5 days. Things were busier. Maybe people didn't feel like it was panic mode reaction. It's not like a brain tumor where they want to do surgery an hour later. But the flip side is I, sitting waiting for my results, was pretty apprehensive and pretty anxious. My understanding now of what we've accomplished with the Prostate Center and the quick turn is extraordinary. Fast results, fast coaching, fast response, and it's timely and appreciated by all men.
Well, I didn't want to know that badly, so I guess you were different than me. But the truth is, I think I had my first diagnosis on the 30th of April, and I had the surgery on the 1st of June. So I thought it moved very quickly. But I remember a couple of funny stories, and Bret's talking about that wonderful biopsy procedure, which is not too much fun. But I decided to go in and tell a few jokes, which I did. And the young lady or the nurse in there said, "Well, that's the first time I've actually laughed while I was doing this procedure." And there was a gentleman there, which I made a joke with, and I won't bother with telling you that story. But I do remember arriving, and you're supposed to drink, I don't know, a gallon of water before you get there, because you're supposed to, fill out. And of course, I took a taxi up, but I forgot to drink the water. So I stopped the taxi, drank all this water, and went in. And as soon as this nurse came over, she said, "You didn't drink the water, did you?" I said, "Yes, I did." "No, but you didn't drink it when you were supposed to drink it." I said, "No, I didn't. You're right. So she says, "Well, we'll see what we can do anyway." And she turned the lights down the room, and the radiation thing came on. It was kind of red. And I said, "If you bring out wine, we're having a date right now."
George, someone just taped this, I'm sure.
Anyway, I had her laughing. Then we went in the other room, and at first I wasn't going to laugh. And then I thought, well, I might as well laugh, because you're not going to get through it any other way.
Well, keeping a sense of humor through all of this is important.
It's very important.
And, again, it goes back, though, to the big picture. We've got some of the best people doing some of the best work, and I'm pretty proud to be even slightly associated, even through doing this work. George and I we've overlapped on dozens and dozens of different charitable and community initiatives, and this is probably one of the most important in terms of men's health.
Yeah, for sure.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us today. Bret Wilson, George Brookman, your continued support of the Calgary Prostate Cancer Center right here in Calgary is very much appreciated. Thank you for all the work that you do and for all of the work that you continue to do going forward.
We look forward to our next talk on politics.
Absolutely.
Bret, don't do this to me.
Zip.
Take good care.
The local dive is the start of Calgary Prostate Cancer Center's Keep It in Calgary campaign, supporting Calgary's best kept secret. We're going to take a few minutes here to learn a little bit more about this amazing center.